Happy Wednesday, Bayou Blitz family and all of Houdat Nation. I am Bob Rose. I am one of your co-hosts for tonight's Bayou Blitz podcast. Joining me is my partner in crime and about to hit the road, road for his road show again, is Brendan Boylan. How are you tonight, Brendan?
Good. Yes, the Brendan Boylan World Tour continues next week. So you guys are not going to have me next Wednesday, but we'll talk a little bit about that later on in the show. Bob, we're getting a chance to recap a victory for the first time in almost a month. So that's always a fun sign. Some Saints got awards this week. The Saints themselves had some personnel moves. Some guys returned to practice. So there's a whole lot to jump into today.
But let's start with that Seattle game on Sunday. Leave it to the Saints to make it exciting and pretty much down to the wire. But yeah, you got to give the Seahawks credit first. They were a team that I thought were going to be among the dregs of the NFL this year, and they've really surprised a lot of people, myself included, with how they played on offense in particular, and especially at the quarterback position. And it was those positions that hurt the Saints defense throughout the afternoon. New Orleans, I thought, controlled the game defensively for stretches of the contest, but they gave up an astonishing amount of big plays. 6 plays of at least 32 yards or more, to be precise. 4 of those were touchdowns, which is the main reason why Seattle was able to put up 32 points. But other than that, like you said, I thought that New Orleans played their best executed game of the season. We've seen them crisper on offense. We've certainly seen them better on defense, but both sides of the ball came up big in the clutch, and they were carried to victory, basically, dragged to victory by Herculean efforts, as I put it in my article, from Taysom Hill and to a slightly lesser extent Alvin Kamara. And I'd like to be I did this in the article too, but let me be the first to welcome Alvin Kamara to the 2022 NFL season.
Yeah, almost a 200-yard performance from scrimmage for Alvin Kamara. I think the thing with the Seahawks, and first and foremost, and I think the broadcast did a good job of giving him credit, and I've seen some guys online as well, has been Geno Smith has played very well this season. We talked about that in the pregame show on Sunday, how many people he surprised. But there was one throw in particular. He rolled out to the left, made a throw on the run, on the money, over an outstretched Paulson Adebo. And seeing it from the spider cam angle, there's not a whole lot of quarterbacks in the world that could make that throw. Geno has really revitalized his career. He had a really good game against New Orleans. Not enough to get the victory, but a really good outing for Geno Smith. And anytime you have guys that were drafted as high as Geno Smith and have bust label next to their name, it's good to see them come back and remind people, hey, the talent's there. It might not have worked the way people intended it to work, but the talent is certainly there. So good for Geno. When it comes to Taysom, I had a whole article. He was my by the numbers this week because he had numbers all across the board. Very literally, 69 return yards, over 100 rushing yards, 22 passing yards, and a fumble recovery. Am I missing anything?
He made the key block to spring Alvin Kamara for that 10-yard run that resulted in a first down and essentially clinched the game for New Orleans. But folks, Taysom Hill does it all, but there's no truth to the rumor that he's the one doing our electronic board behind the scenes right now. I don't know the whereabouts of Taysom Hill at this particular moment.
Oh man, he literally did everything, and it was a little mind-boggling because over the years we've certainly had the memes come up, and you and I have pieces and talked about it. First quarterback to ever block a punt and this and that. But very literally, Taysom did everything to will the Saints to victory. Incredible. To the 3% of you that started him in fantasy, whether it was at flex or tight end this week, congratulations on your 40-point outing for a guy that I believe I've told you guys the last couple of weeks to not even consider having an article. I did put out there that he was a stretch, but an interesting tight end pickup in leagues because of the injury to Jameis Winston. I still didn't have him even on my team. I don't even think anybody in my league had him rostered. So congrats to you guys, nonetheless. But Bob, I do think the Saints have played their most efficient offensive football the last 2 weeks. I'm going to be interested to see, and let's not get too ahead of ourselves, but I'm interested to see how Taysom is going to be utilized moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Dennis Allen said he did want to see him at quarterback a little bit more, which is the exact opposite of what we heard at the beginning of the season with him moving on. But listen, however you can get a spark for the Saints offense, I know teams are prepared for Taysom Hill. I don't think that ever stopped. But the fact that you have these teams that are prepared for Taysom Hill, they know when he comes in the game, 99% of the time it's going to be a run play, one way or the other, and they still can't stop it. Says a lot about Taysom, and it says a lot about how well the offensive line of the New Orleans Saints that you and I have crucified this year at times, how well they have done run blocking. We mentioned it going into this week, the holes that they opened up in London was a pleasant surprise. And we said with Alvin coming back, we expected a big game out of Alvin. He delivered that, and so did Taysom Hill. So, you got to tip your hat to the guys up front.
Yeah, absolutely you do. And, I thought this offensive line has played very good football for the last 2 weeks, really. And you pointed out the Vikings game, too. We like to be somewhat fair at the Bayou Blitz here. Like Brendan said, we have crucified the offensive line. It feels like week after week. I have been very critical of the coaching staff in general, Dennis Allen and Pete Carmichael in particular. And, I thought that Pete Carmichael did an outstanding job of game planning for the Seattle Seahawks, especially in the run. Football is a simple game, but it's not. Especially when you get up to the higher levels. Yeah, you still have to execute. You still have to play better than the guy across from you, et cetera, et cetera. But it's more than designing. It's more than just hand the ball to Taysom Hill or hand the ball to Alvin Kamara and let him run straight ahead in the run game. When a defense expects this, and as Saints receivers keep dropping like flies, the defenses are going to continue to overload the tackle box more and more. You got to design plays to get your runners in the optimum position to succeed. And in Alvin Kamara's case, it's giving Kamara cutback lanes. In Taysom Hill's case and Mark Ingram's case, it's getting push at the point of attack and just giving them one crease to find. You have to, again, it comes down to your player has to be their player, but you have to devise schemes on how to do this. Because one offensive lineman can't block 2 to 3 defenders at the same time. And I thought Pete Carmichael did an outstanding job of doing that. The defensive coaches in this game, not so much. I thought they really, no pun intended, I thought they really dropped the ball in making adjustments when the safeties in particular, and the secondary in general, had probably their poorest outing of the season. And instead of adjusting to that, by maybe dropping an extra guy back or playing a too high deep zone with your safeties, they continue to stay with their game plan, which more often than not works. Let's face reality. But Seattle continued to gash the Saints over the middle, with deep pass plays and plays in the intermediate zones with Lockett, DK Metcalf, and Noah Fant on the run. So I was a little bit disappointed in the Saints defensive coaching staff, but I know they'll bounce back because you don't see this unit, knock on wood, you don't see this unit have 2 consecutive games. All in all, I thought the coaches have done a much better job, and generally speaking, for each of the last 2 games.
I think defensively, the biggest and most glaring error throughout the game was the secondary, in particular, that safety spot that they probably had to fill a little bit more last minute than they wanted to. Obviously, with PJ Williams going on IR, most of us expected Marcus May to be a go. When he was unable to go, scrambling around and trying to get a guy like JT Gray, who is excellent in what he does as a special teamer, right? As an all-pro level special teamer, to have to throw him back there into coverage or trying to get Justin Evans to play a little bit out of position wasn't the most ideal, and it showed particularly at the end of the second quarter with a deep ball down the seam that resulted in the Seahawks touchdown. Just miscommunication maybe, but more so the safety shading to the wrong side. And that plays more to not understanding the play call and the coverage than anything. And if you're getting a guy like Gray, who I'm imagining is probably not doing that practice day in, day out, you're going to have some of that. Now, hopefully May's able to return next week against the Bengals, shore up some of that. The one thing that we haven't got from New Orleans so far this year, Bob, is a complete game. Offense, defense, special teams. We've had instances where the defense looked really good and the offense couldn't do anything. I look at a game like Carolina for that. The defense played really well.
Tampa
Bay, and the offense wasn't able to contribute. I look at a game like Atlanta where you had maybe a good half of football from the defense, a good half, maybe really a good 12-minute stretch of football for the offense, and that was that. And then you even get to this past week against Seattle, where the offense looked really good and the defense didn't. Special teams looked good, but the defense didn't. You're still looking to find a game where New Orleans dominates in all three phases. With that said, looking at what the team was able to do against Seattle, what were some things that really stuck out to you offensively for a team that just a couple weeks ago was one of the worst in football?
Well, again, you got to start with the Saints' offensive line. Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara's exploits have been talked about all week, and rightfully so. But the Saints were winning their battles along the offensive line, and with the receivers that they have on the sideline and street clothes right now, that was the difference in the game, really. And again, I'll give credit to Pete Carmichael all year long. Brendan, you and I have been calling for, and I was calling for it all the way back to from the middle of last season. Why aren't you getting Alvin Kamara in space? Why aren't you trying to get Alvin Kamara in space? Well, they got Alvin Kamara in space on Sunday, and look what happened. 103 rushing yards, 91 receiving yards, 29 touches. That's what happens when you utilize the most dynamic running back and most versatile running back in pro football. So that was the key to their success. And especially with the injuries in the receiving core, that's going to be the key to their success going forward. And listen, even when they get Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, Jarvis Landry, any or all of those three back, Alvin Kamara is still the straw that stirs this offensive drink. Alvin Kamara is the player that defenses game plan for. They shift their coverage to Michael Thomas. They respect Chris Olave. They respect Jarvis Landry. And I think they respect the quarterback position. But you game plan for Alvin Kamara. So if a defense is going to game plan for everything that a player like Alvin Kamara does, then why don't you counter that by letting Kamara try to do everything that Alvin Kamara does? And that's where I thought the key to their offensive success was on Sunday.
Kamara looked very much like Alvin Kamara. A vintage performance was needed. And I think that he certainly delivered. He's going to have another tough test on Sunday. Going back to Taysom Hill, believe it or not, Bob, only his second 100-yard rushing day in his career. The other one came against the Giants last year. He had an 8-yard touchdown.
Cowboys.
No, it was the Giants, I believe. We'll have to fact check because
I'll bet you a Bayou Blitz T-shirt it was the Cowboys.
I wrote the article today, so unless I was off my research today, I had the Giants last year as the only other time he went for 100.
Now, you see, Bayou Blitz family, this is why we always tell you do not bet on anything that I say. Yeah, I'm willing to stick with the bet I just made with Brendan Boylan here. But if he just wrote an article on it, my heart sunk. Yeah, what's left of my heart sunk about 2 feet. So, yeah, we will research that, however, as soon as the show is over, and we'll post the winner of our wager in the Bayou Blitz group and on the Bayou Blitz Twitter page. So make sure you stay tuned for that one.
Yeah, I had the Giants last year was the only other time. I think he only had 101. So it's not like he's ever gone very well and above 100 yards. But nonetheless,
Right.
He wouldn't have got there without a 60-yard touchdown run in the fourth quarter. But like I said, I think the one thing that stood out about Taysom is outside of the 12 yards per carry, and again, the 60-yard touchdown run definitely skews that number a lot,
Sure.
is the fact that the Saints continued to go to it throughout the game.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that was very, very frustrating over the years with Drew Brees, particularly at quarterback with Taysom Hill, was that Hill would come in like a 3rd and 3 situation, and you'd be taking the ball out of the hands of Drew Brees on a 3rd and 3, and that was always frustrating. Well, in today's world, covering the New Orleans Saints, you're now taking the ball out of Andy Dalton's hands. I can live with that a little bit more than when they were taking it out of Drew Brees' hands. But the thing is, everyone in the stadium, everyone watching on TV, every reporter, analyst, etc., knew what was going to happen when Taysom Hill came in the game. Mm-hmm. Right? And what do you know, Bob? He ran the ball on a quarterback power. Crazy. Who would have predicted that? But the Seahawks couldn't stop it, and the Saints continued to go to it, which leads me into something I brought up about 5 minutes ago is, what is that going to look like moving forward for New Orleans in sprinkling Taysom Hill into this offense? Because we've learned in years past as well, Taysom has a great run. Games or a good stretch of games. But then the defenses figure it out. They load the box with however many, and it's not as pretty as it once was. How long can the Saints realistically ride this, do you think?
I think they can continue to ride it. Yeah, because it's just like having a running back in the backfield. And I'll use Derrick Henry for an example. You know that Derrick Henry is going for the Tennessee Titans is going to get the ball more often than not, unless the Titans are facing 3rd and long or something ridiculous. But Derrick Henry is one of the most consistently productive running backs in football. Why? A, because he is that good. And B, because the Tennessee Titans offensive scheme is predicated on Derrick Henry being productive. So that means they have to win their battles up front. Taysom Hill will continue to be productive if the Saints win their battles up front. And I did love the fact that they finally let him throw the ball, resulting in an Adam Troutman a touchdown pass on Sunday. And I'm not advocating Taysom Hill throw a lot. I'm certainly not advocating for Taysom Hill to be the starting quarterback. Nothing crazy like that. But what that does, throws film out there for other defenses to study, and making them think that, yeah, Taysom Hill can throw the ball out of this formation. Now, make no mistake about it. Like you just said, 95, 99% of the time, the Saints are going to run out of that formation when Taysom Hill is lined up at the Wildcat quarterback spot. But the fact that that the Saints are willing to let him throw from that formation forces defenses to at least keep one extra defender back in a just-in-case kind of coverage, which means that's not a defender to deal with Hill and the Saints blockers at the point of attack. On the second level, on a running play, sure, but the second level of a defense is 5 to 7 yards down the field. I will take a 5 to 7 yard gain from Taysom Hill every time he rushes the football if that's what it takes. So, yeah, I don't see the strategy changing with Taysom Hill a whole lot going forward. And I will note this, too. This year, and especially the last 2 or 3 games that he has played, in years past, and look at the film, when Taysom Hill ran the ball, which was 99% of the time when he was in the game, 95% of those runs were over the right side. the last couple games I have noticed, and especially against the Seattle Seahawks, they've been running Taysom Hill more on the left side. Now, I realize that seems like a subtle switch, and okay, well, how does that change a defense? That changes a defense a lot, because when you're saying these power runs that they do with Taysom Hill and Mark Ingram, when Ingram was in his prime too, a defense slants towards a certain side if a play is slanted to go towards that certain side. So it's almost a misdirection at times that they're running with Hill. When the blockers slant or block down to their right, but Taysom turns and runs it left, it's not a naked bootleg per se, but it is a misdirection in the fact that you get the defense flowing one way while you still have blockers and maybe a man or two blocking advantage onto the other side. So it's these subtle nuances, subtle twists that Pete Carmichael is putting into these Taysom Hill plays that I'm really liking.
I agree, and I love everything you said about, especially with the touchdown pass to Troutman, because they can find ways to have Taysom Hill throw the ball effectively out of that formation. Talk about headaches.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about anything crazy. It can be a two-man route. But if Taysom can hit a guy for 5 yards, 10 yards, right up the seam like he did for Troutman, you're opening up a whole new world for a defense to have to prepare for. So that's going to be really interesting. The biggest thing that I'm going to have moving forward and this is how we'll transition into some of the news of the day, is with the Saints down 2 running backs over the last 2 weeks, with Murray leaving, and also with Tony Jones Jr., who was popular on the waiver wire, by the way.
Yeah.
3 different teams put in waiver claims for him. With all of that going on, how does Taysom Hill fit into this? The Saints respond by adding another running back because you almost have to. With just Kamara and Ingram, they go and sign Jordan Howard, who famous for his days in Chicago. Some of you might remember for his short-lived time in Philadelphia. But a very solid player, really good hands out of the backfield. But with the decrease we've seen in Ingram snaps, whether that be age, whether it be effectiveness, and with another running back coming in that offers you a little bit more versatility than Ingram and a lot less miles on the legs, could you see Taysom Hill potentially fill a running back 2 spot per se for the Saints moving forward? Or do you still think that this go-go gadget type of offense, because I don't like the term wildcat because it's not a true wildcat. It's not a running.
You're right.
But this go-go gadget type of formation for Hill, is that going to replace some of the production you see out of Marking?
Yeah, I think it will. Because why wouldn't it? That play, that formation, that player, Taysom Hill, has been far more productive than Mark Ingram or Dwayne Washington or Tony Jones Jr. So why wouldn't you run with it? And I know what you're saying about Taysom Hill filling an RB2, a running back 2 role, not in the traditional sense though, but in the type and the number of touches that he's going to get, the number of rushes he's going to get. So based off of what we've seen out of Ingram, and what that the team has in Dwayne Washington, the JT Gray of the offense, if you would. I absolutely would give Taysom Hill the second most rushes next to Alvin Kamara week in and week out until Ingram or perhaps Jordan Howard, can show me that they can be consistently productive.
And that's one thing that's going to be really interesting is how do the Saints use a guy like Jordan Howard, because he's at that point in his career. He's had some injuries. He's had some ups. He's had some downs. What's left in the tank? As much as I might say I like the signing, as much as some of you guys in the comments, and I believe somebody even said it earlier that they liked the signing, there's a reason he's a free agent. That's a really simple thing to say, and you probably hear it from people a lot more than you want to, but it's true. There are however many other scouts and GMs that are looking at a roster and go, I don't think this guy's going to fit. They see something that we don't see. We see the highlight packages
Right.
for however many years ago. Wow, that'd be really nice to have. But it's going to be interesting to see how they dust off, everything with Howard and see how he fits. Because on paper and seeing what he's done in his NFL career, I think it could be a really good fit. As a guy just to spell Kamara, maybe include him in some of those packages with Taysom Hill. It's just another spice in the spice cabinet. It's not going to be your salt and pepper. It's not going to be what you use every day, but it's there as something different if you need it. Bob, hate to admit it, and we'll post it on Twitter as well. I got my NFC East teams mixed up on the air. And that's why I got this, So one of you lucky people are going to walk away with a Bayou Blitz T-shirt, courtesy of Brendan's Wallet. We will let you know how to enter for that drawing. You're welcome for my miscue of NFC East teams, my friends. But moving into next week, Bob, along with the Howard news, I think the second biggest news of the day was that Jameis Winston returned to practice for the Saints today. Obviously, with some back and ankle issues, you saw, and one thing that I really love, not just with Jameis, but anybody who's out with an injury that's active and on the sideline, is the cutaway shots that they'd have from the broadcast of him just being hyped for his teammates, whether it was Andy, whether it was Taysom. What was his quote over the offseason? It was like, he realized that his passion is playing football. Not just football, but playing football. Well, he couldn't play football, but he certainly showed his passion for just football. We've had those reports since he got to New Orleans, whether it be from John or Kyle, other people down there at the facility, that he's as good of a teammate as they come. And that's not something we could particularly say about Jameis Winston 5-6 years ago. But I think he's really turned a corner, and we've talked about that a lot, but it was great to see. The one thing that's made New Orleans special over the last 5 or 6 years is the locker room chemistry. It's great to see that that's still there, even when the team's not performing.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And that, you're right. That is the one thing that we heard about Jameis Winston, from 2020, from the moment that he signed with New Orleans, and since then. And even and critics of Jameis Winston will still love to point out the maturity issues, the transgressions off the field. I'd rather not get too deeply into them, dating back to college and at Florida State in his early days at Tampa Bay. But even 2019, when it was pretty clear that Bruce Arians was going to go another direction after that season, and I think Jameis had even been benched once or threatened to be benched. Arians and several Buccaneers players said after the fact that Jameis handled it like a true pro. And I pointed that out to people when the Saints signed him in 2020. I'm like, this doesn't sound like the same kid, that got into trouble and drew all kinds of controversy at Florida State or within his first 2 NFL seasons. And you're right, to see him so hyped on the sidelines, and we saw it in London too. To see him so hyped on the sidelines and encouraging to his teammates, not only when they did something well, but when a unit or a player was struggling a little bit, he was there with them on the sidelines, at least the best as we could see. So you want your quarterback to be a leader first. And I think Jameis Winston has that box checked. I know that he has the therefore probably the respect of a lot of the players in that locker room. And that goes a long way. But having said that, based off of the Saints roster now, based off of the injury that we know Jameis Winston is dealing with, and, listen, we don't know what limited practice actually means. Did he run through a couple drills lightweight and just call it a day? Or did he make a couple throws? Did he participate in some drills? We don't know. That's a pretty wide range to use for the term limited practice. If Jameis Winston can go, and you're Dennis Allen, Who do you start this week against the Cincinnati Bengals?
I think if you would have asked me that question prior to the Seattle game, I might have had a different answer. But for different reasons than you may believe. Personally, if Jameis is healthy enough to practice all week and you're confident that he can go, I'm starting Jameis, and here's why. Obviously, you and I are both in agreement. When healthy, when able to go, Jameis is a better quarterback than Andy Dalton.
No doubt.
At this point in their careers. But what we had just spent the last 10, 15 minutes talking about, the fact that you do have Taysom Hill now, who has found, at least in my article, I said refound his purpose and refound his role in the Saints offense in this go-go gadget. That's just the term I'm going to use. I don't know if people hate it or not, but go-go gadget type of formation. The fact that you have that in your playbook, it gives you more flexibility and more options with a little bit of a beat-up Jameis Winston. If you get into a situation where you feel like you can ride Taysom Hill for a couple plays on a drive, by all means, you can. Mm-hmm. I would start Jameis for that reason, and the other reason being this. Yes, the Saints' offense has looked better the last couple weeks, but it's not like they've looked better because they've thrown the ball really well or protections held up really well in the pass game. It's been their ability to run the football. So the mix of the fact that you now have Taysom Hill, who has re-solidified himself as the Saints' secret weapon offensively. You have a healthy Alvin Kamara. You have an offensive line that's played extremely well run blocking the last 2 weeks. It takes a lot of pressure off Jameis Winston to have to go back there and throw the ball a ton. That's why I would start Jameis Winston. Now, you're hoping a lot of things go your way, because if it gets to the point where you're down 14 in the fourth quarter and Jameis has to throw the ball a ton, you're kind of going like, I don't know. Yeah. He's got a bad back. He's got a bad ankle. But at least from the jump, you know that you're playing the best available talent. And that's why I'd go with Jameis.
You know, your reasoning is sound. But if I'm Dennis Allen, I'm going with Andy Dalton, and here's why. You are facing the Cincinnati Bengals, who have a very, very good pass rush. Some guy named Trey Hendrickson. He's the guy that everybody talks about. But Sam Hubbard at the other edge is really, really good too. B.J. Hill, when it looked like he was going to hit the free agent market this offseason, I was screaming for the Saints to bring in a player like B.J. Hill before Cincinnati re-signed him. He is a terrific interior rusher. So the Bengals are going to bring pressure on a quarterback. Specifically, they have 8 sacks this season, but they have 33 quarterback hits. Quarterback hits, that's not pressures, folks. That's hits. And I'm not 100% convinced that Jameis Winston is well enough to play effectively. We're not. I don't want to use the word healthy, because no NFL player is going to be healthy from here on out. You talk to any player and they will tell you that. But Jameis is going to be dealing with this back injury all year. I want him to be as healthy as possible before I trot him back out there. And reason B, Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry. For starters, I don't think in any of my my time in covering the Saints for Saints News Network or otherwise, I don't think any other game I have been more interested about an injury report. Thinking to myself, the Saints need this player or need that player to win this game. Usually I just say, oh, that's going to hurt, but they could still win, and this is how. To deal with that Bengals pass rush and to take advantage of what I think is a vulnerable Bengals secondary, you need at least 2 of those 3 wide receivers in there. And if you don't have that optimum talent, then you need a quarterback that's more apt to spread the ball around, more willing to spread the ball around, more willing to get rid of the ball, to a check down or a hot route than what Jameis Winston has showed, particularly this season. Jameis is notorious for holding on to the ball, and it shows a lot of guts, but B, not a lot of brains. And I'm not calling him a dumb player by any stretch. It's just sometimes your competitiveness works against you. And Jameis wants to make a big play so bad that's why he has taken some of these hits. That's why he has taken some of these shots. Andy Dalton, to me, seems like the player that is more likely to take the check down route, take what the defense gives him. And you can get a lot of yards on the Bengals that way. That's reason B. Reason C, Jameis Winston has always been – Jameis Winston's worst enemy is Jameis Winston. He has a hard time reeling in his emotions. He has a hard time playing within himself. Andy Dalton, if he starts this week, Andy Dalton is playing the Cincinnati Bengals, the team that drafted him, the team that he took to four, maybe 5 straight playoffs, the team that gave up on him. If Jameis Winston can watch Andy Dalton play within himself, playing his former team, then that's a lesson to what is still a very young football player in Jameis. So those 3 primary reasons are the reasons I start Andy Dalton this week. But if Jameis Winston would be healthy enough to go, I do suit him up in case I do need a fourth quarter guy that's going to throw it all over the yard, or in case Andy gets a little dinged up. Because again, this is a very good pass rush. Whoever plays quarterback, they're going to get hit this week. So I think I suit up Jameis Winston if he's able to go, but I start Andy Dalton.
Well, for those reasons you just brought up, let's bring up this question. Do you think a hybrid offense between West Coast and Taysom could work every game? I think personally, Bob, if you're wanting to run the West Coast type of system, Andy Dalton's going to be a better fit than Jameis. I don't see it working every game, though, because – and then this is why. The old saying of when you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have 1 quarterback. If you're really splitting it like that, that's going to be an issue. But if you can sprinkle Taysom in, that's different. I just think there would be an issue of over-sprinkling, over-seasoning already there if you want to try something.
Yeah, you're right. And Taysom Hill, for all the yards and all the plays that he made on Sunday, he still only touched the ball 10 times from scrimmage. And that's on the high side for Taysom Hill. So, I agree with you. And I agree with what I think you're saying anyway. And that if I'm Pete Carmichael and if I'm Dennis Allen, I don't take this high production as an indicator that I am going to give Taysom Hill 15, 20, 25 touches a game. I think keeping Taysom within, night, Will, love you. I think keeping Taysom Hill within 6 to 8 touches average per game is reasonable. 10, 12, 15 touches on the high side. If he's being very productive and a defense has a hard time containing him, that'd be my cap for him.
Absolutely. And that's another reason why even after this week, I don't think he's a great waiver wire pickup for fantasy. I just don't. Now, if he could still play quarterback in fantasy, I understand why people would be willing to take the touchdown risk.
Yeah.
But he's not. He's classified as a tight end to tight end only. And with everything Bob just said, you look at the amount of touches that Taysom has throughout the year, and particularly the games where he does not find the end zone, he's an awful fantasy play. So there's my little fantasy segment, my fantasy rant for the day, for the week. Don't pick up Taysom Hill and expect him to go and score you 38 points again in a PPR league. I mean, some of you are going to be like, well, duh, Brendan. Like, guys don't score 4 touchdowns a whole lot in a game. Yes, that's true. But I think it was week 2. One of you brilliant fans of ours, said you felt like Taysom was a quiet, good tight end play. And I said, no, he's not. Because even in the game against Atlanta where he scored, he only touched the ball X amount of times. That's why I just don't. Let's see, Jimmy Gumbo just said in Yahoo he's listed a quarterback and tight end.
Interesting.
Where he's still there. I'll throw this out there for anybody who's considering playing him at quarterback as well. A typical quarterback, right, in today's game throws the ball like 30 times, right? That's a good median, right? Okay, so that's like 30 touches in a game, right? Taysom's still only getting like a third of that. So if you're even relying on him to score a touchdown, you're relying on 6 points to even make it worth being reasonable.
Yep.
Now, when he's a quarterback, like when he started that stretch last year, I was gun-ho about going and picking him up because of the amount of rushing yards you were going to get. You have the game against Denver a couple years ago where it was a super ugly game and Denver was starting a wide receiver at quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
But Taysom Hill ran for 2 touchdowns
and
was a top-scoring fantasy quarterback because of it. So please, if you listen to this, if you read any fantasy article I put out there, stay away from Taysom Hill. He's going to blow up. He's going to get picked up in like 30% of leagues because of one game. People are going to start him. He's going to score three fantasy points next week, and people are going to be like, what happened? You have to take that in consideration in fantasy. Yeah. If you're not getting targeted a lot and you're a receiver, or if you're a running back and you're only getting 10 carries a game, it doesn't look good to start you.
Nope.
All right, that's all I got, Bob.
Well, good. Hey, good, because I'm gonna try to. I like to hear you rant rather than me.
It's different.
It is different. Next question I want to ask you. Again, Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, Jarvis Landry on the injury report.
Yeah.
Defensively, I'm going to leave Mark Moore out of this because he'd be the obvious selection. Defensively, let's throw Marcus May in. I think 2 of those 4 guys, Thomas, Olave, Landry, May. I think 2 of those 4 guys practiced on a limited basis, and 2 did not today. If you had your pick against the Cincinnati Bengals of only one of those guys playing, who is it and why?
I'm going to go receiver because I don't think there's ever been a game that I've covered in this year 7 or 8 years with Saints News, whether it was Saints News Radio, Saints News Network on SI. I don't think I've ever covered a game where all 3 of you're starting 3 receivers. Because that's how it is now, right? You got 1, 2, and then your slot guy. I don't think I've ever covered a game where all 3 missed. And then you look at what the Saints have, and you didn't even bring it up, but with Deontay Hardy, who is believed to have suffered a pretty significant injury as well, though he hasn't got a lot of snaps at receiver this year, that's a guy that would just, be elevated up, next man up, and you don't have him either. So you'd be looking at like Callaway, my guy Keith Kirkwood, and elevating Kevin White, who just came off IR.
Kevin White, Kirk Merritt, maybe Rashid Shaheed to go along with Trashquan Smith.
Oh, Traquan, thanks. Forgot about Traquan.
I wish I could.
Well, one of those guys is going to get brought up to be a return man more than anyway, but there's not a lot past Olave on that depth chart. So I guess for selfish reasons, and for selfish reasons of not myself, but Who Dat Nation, would probably really like to see Michael Thomas just absolutely cook Eli Apple. And I know there's a lot of bad blood there. And so I will say this, and don't shoot arrows at me, guys. For like 8 games, Eli Apple was exactly what New Orleans needed at quarterback too.
Hell yes.
For like 8 to 10 games. In that range, he was really, really good opposite Lattimore. And I'm not saying really, really good as a football player, but really, really good in what the Saints needed out of him. Because you remember what the Saints had before that.
Yeah.
And you're looking at like B.W. Webb. You're looking at Ken Crawley, who very much like Eli Apple had a good stretch with New Orleans.
P.J. Williams as an outside cornerback.
Right, and you go back through that, and you're like, oh man, we really needed somebody, and it was like Eli Apple came in and was decent. Okay, then we could do this. Remember, the Saints almost went and got a Super Bowl.
Yep,
and should have. So before we get into the bad blood part of it, he was good at times while he was in New Orleans. That second season in New Orleans is where it went to be bad.
Yeah,
and he's still not that good. And I think it is a little entertaining that you have guys all across the league that are calling Eli Apple out. Even Tyreek Hill last week, calling him out. It is a little entertaining. There's going to be a lot of bad blood. So I think personally you look at Thomas because you want to see that. But two, you want to see Thomas be healthy consistently for a stretch. And the last thing I want to see for Mike, and being a guy that we've both had the chance to cover since his rookie year in 2016, the last thing you want to see for a guy who it's a little early still, but, definitely has Hall of Fame talent, has definitely had seasons where you could say he's a Hall of Fame talent. The last thing you want to see is, he's injury prone. He's injury prone. Because I believe it was you, Bob, who made the excellent point. He had one injury the last 2 years. One. And it nagged along, right? And unfortunately, we live in a world now where one nagging injury makes you injury prone. But this is a separate injury. And I don't want to see that. I don't want to see, he's an injury-prone receiver. Because he's still bomb. Leads the NFL in contested catches. He's missed however many games now. He has 3 touchdown grabs this year. Remember, this is a guy who's never had more than 9 in a season. He was on pace to just absolutely blow by his own career high. And I think whether it's Dalton or Winston, there's something about having the combination of Kamara and Thomas on the field together and healthy that unlocks another part of the Saints offense. And I know we really haven't had the opportunity to see that outside of the Drew Brees years, unfortunately. But I'd like to see what that combination can unlock with the offense that the Saints now have. And I think against a struggling Cincinnati secondary and a guy who excels in short and intermediate, which means the ball is going to have to come out quick against that really good pass rush, I think a guy like Thomas could really eat against the Bengals. And Landry could too, because Landry's got the same attributes in the short and the intermediate. But I would like to see it be Thomas. I do think Landry's going to play because a lot of people thought he was going to play last week. So having a week to nurse that, I think that Landry's going to be good to go. I know Thomas is expected to play this week, but that's the guy I want to see is Mike Thomas.
Yeah, me too. And listen, all those guys are important. We saw the Saints safety position just play abysmally last week. So and now you're going up against Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, Hayden Hurst, and maybe T. Higgins. He's banged up too. That's another story.
But the Bengals offense has been pretty bad themselves at times this year too.
It has, but you look at all the talent on that, and we'll get into the game plan against them in a minute. You look at all the talent on that side. It's going to need to be hands on deck. We're going to be watching Marshawn Lattimore's injury report very, 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 very closely this week. They need Marcus May back in the lineup. But I'm with you. I go and I think at least 2 of these 3 wide receivers that we're talking about are going to play. I'll be very interesting to see what happens with the new concussion protocols for player safety. Look at my face, folks. Player safety. Anyway, I'll be interested to see what happens with Chris Olave and how he's coming through protocols. We're hearing that he's in stage or phase 2, which the next phase is on-field football workouts. So that's a nice progression if you're talking about a Wednesday afternoon. But if I'm going to pick one player, I go with Michael Thomas also. If the Saints have 2 or 3 of these guys back, I think the one guy that Cincinnati is going to try to avoid Eli Apple guarding is Michael Thomas. These two go way back to their Ohio State days. And, very famously or infamously, Thomas destroyed Eli Apple in practice after practice after practice, so much so that the story goes that on a couple occasions, Thomas would whip the ball at Eli Apple and scream at the defensive coaches, "Get somebody out here who can bleep and guard me." If there's one thing, and I'm with you, Kyle Mosley, our boss now, and my host on the Bayou Blitz when it started in 2018, would make fun of me every single week. He would say, your guy, Eli Apple, came up big again. Well, he'd said that for 6, 7, 8 straight weeks. And I'm like, Eli Apple was balling out that season. He was as good as any Saints defender that year, especially in the secondary. But Eli Apple is a head case. He's a notorious head case. He gets his confidence shaken just a little bit, or a trash talker gets inside of his head. And Michael Thomas is a trash talker, folks. He doesn't throw the theatrics out that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson did, but he's an agitator. He's a trash talker. He gets defensive backs off of their game, not only with his own physical style of play, but he gets in their heads too. He will destroy Eli Apple if he plays against him on Sunday. So, for entertainment value and the reasons that you mentioned, he is just the ultimate security blanket for any quarterback that could ever ask for. I think that the Saints will get 2 of the 3 receivers back, and we're going to be watching May and especially Lattimore very, very closely. But I think getting a couple of these guys off of the injured list and onto the field on Sunday, that's going to be the key to victory as much as anything.
Absolutely. And to go off what you said, and John Butler just threw it in our comments too, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree for Eli. Because you look at some of the things that have happened with his mother as well.
Yeah, they both have me blocked for almost 2 years now, but I'm aware.
Yeah. How do I put this? Did the Giants really think, outside of the potential merchandise sales of drafting a guy named Apple, with some of the things that were even coming out during the draft process for Eli Apple, and you did a good job of explaining some of that, you really thought he was going to last in New York?
Right.
All media places in the world. You thought New York was going to work? Like I said, I think he was excellent for the time that the Saints needed him to be excellent. As a human being, do I feel bad for the amount of hate that he got after the Super Bowl too? Yes, I don't think I could deal with it personally. That's just me being honest. I don't think I could wake up every day and see on Twitter that I'm awful at my job. But anybody who watched that Super Bowl knew on that last drive for the Rams, if Cooper Kupp is lined up and Eli Apple's on the opposite side, I know where the ball's going.
Yep.
Cooper Kupp ate him up. That's what made Cooper Kupp. I mean, still Cooper Kupp. Year, well, I mean, he's arguably the best receiver in football, if not the best receiver in football right now. But anyway, I think that's the matchup everybody wants to see is Mike Thomas and Eli Apple.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to bring up in terms of homecomings, because it's a homecoming for Eli Apple, certainly, but the big homecomings are the guys for the Bengals on the offensive side of the ball. Even though they never played in the black and gold, they played in the gold and purple, or the yellow and purple. It just depends who you're asking. What is it? Gold? Is it yellow? You know how it goes.
Yeah, I don't know.
You live in Pittsburgh, you know. Is it black and yellow, or is it black and gold in Pittsburgh? You know that.
I get it. Well, they like to say black and gold, but that's just the. There's a chromosome missing, chromosome or 2 missing in the average Pittsburgh Steeler fan. It's black and yellow, people. The Saints are black and gold. Period. I mean, it's not a licensing thing. It's know your damn colors. It's black and yellow.
I'll throw one more thing out there just for giggles, Bob, is there's a local Pittsburgh hip-hop artist who's became pretty big over the years, Wiz Khalifa. He had a whole song called Black and Yellow in reference to, you guys get it, okay? We understand. And the Steelers even used that as one of their Super Bowl run songs today. So just, anyway, moving on. You got Joe Burrow and you got Jamar Chase coming back to Louisiana. Obviously, those guys were part of one of, if not the most effective, scary, whatever adjective you want to use in terms of college offenses. And I know both of those guys, even though they're going to be playing for the opposite team, they're going to get quite an ovation just for what they did during their time at LSU. You mentioned both those guys as being scary dudes for the Saints. To match up against. We got 5 minutes. What's the keys to shutting down or slowing down Burrow and Chase?
It's the pass rush. The Saints have got to get to Burrow. And, the Bengals spent a lot of free agent money on rebuilding their offensive line, and it just hasn't come together yet. It's evident all over the board. The Bengals are only averaging 3.3 per carry. So, you got to shut down the run and make them one-dimensional. Now, I grant you that dimension is scary. It is scary what Joe Burrow and that passing game can do. But you also know that you can get to him. Burrow's been sacked 19 times. He has been hit officially pressured around 40 times. So the Saints can get to him. They'll need to. I mentioned Marshawn Lattimore playing is key. What I would do in the secondary, T. Higgins is another injury, is another name to watch on the injury report through the week. T is dealing with an ankle injury, and everybody talks about Jamar Chase, and he's my favorite receiver in the league, not wearing a Saints uniform to watch. Because what Jamar Chase does is he's a special football player. But T. Higgins would be the number one featured wide receiver on most NFL teams. He is that good. The thing about Chase and Higgins, they're taller guys, but they're slight. And the thing that we know about Marshawn Lattimore and Paulson Adebo, and to a lesser extent Bradley Roby, they're physical guys. So what I would do, you need to get physical with these guys at the line of scrimmage. You're not going to intimidate them. You're not going to get inside their head. But what you could do by doing that is just throw them off of their pass routes, throw the timing off of that offense just a little bit. And, that half second, if you could do that, that half second disruption is another half second to give your pass rush time to get to Burrow. Now, I realize how dangerous Higgins and, Chase and also Tyler Boyd are. You can get to Burrow with a four-man front or a fifth if you want to blitz to Mario Davis. So I wouldn't worry about bringing Tyrann Mathieu and hopefully Marcus May into that safety box or into that tackle box. If I'm going to get that physical in man-to-man coverage with those Bengal wide receivers, I'm going a too high safety to give optimum deep coverage over the top, because we've seen Adebo get beat in recent weeks, and I still don't think that angle is 100%. We've seen Lattimore get beat deep in the last 2 weeks. And as good as those two guys are, and they are very, very good, Higgins and Chase can match them in abilities. So that's why I would safeguard in keeping May and Mathieu, or Mathieu and Evans as two deep safeties, with the confidence that my pass rush can get to and disrupt Burrow, and that I could stop the Cincinnati running game without an extra defender in the box.
The Bengals like tigers, don't they? Whether it's Clemson, whether it's LSU, T. Higgins was great in the orange down in my neck of the woods as well for some of those Clemson Tiger teams. Before we sign off and go with one more little question, haven't really interacted with you guys as much as we normally do. So just quick shout outs to everybody: Scoob, Gypsy, JGP Jr., Jimmy Gumbo, John Butler. Missing anybody? Charlene, DJ, Be Kind, of course. All you guys, all you regulars. I'm a little a little sleepy. Obviously, I couldn't even remember NFC East teams earlier, so trying to get to your questions. And, we had a lot to talk about. This is the most we've had a lot to talk about opposed to some of the other weeks where it's just been doom and gloom, right? At least there's some signs of hope here in this one. Last thing, Bob, is don't want to give up too much of our pregame show on Sunday, but this is a Saints team that you don't want to call it a must-win every week going forward. No. You certainly don't want to drop to 2-4. They're going to be their first out-of-conference opponent.
Mm-hmm.
But it is the defending AFC champions. If the Saints are to win this game, do you feel it's going to be more because of the offense or the defense?
I would say defense. Yeah, because the offense, we don't know what kind of health they're going to be in yet. Now those offensive players are going to have to make plays. This is not going to be a 9-0 or a 13-10 game or anything like that. The offense is going to have to make plays and, most importantly, avoid mistakes. And by mistakes, I especially mean turnovers. But I think that if New Orleans wins this game, it's going to be because of the defense. And I would say that even if it were a 30-28 game, and I'm expecting it to be a score somewhere in that range, I still think it's the defense is going to have to make the plays to win the game.
We'll see if the Saints defense is the real reason that they win the football game. Obviously, Bob and I will have a little bit more for you guys on Sunday. But Bob, in the meantime, you got to tell people where they can follow you and where they can enter to win a free T-shirt courtesy of me.
Well, first of all, folks, Bayou Blitz family, thank you for tuning in tonight. And thank you, as always, for all the support that you give Brendan, myself, all of us at the Saints News Network, including Kyle Mosley and John Hendricks. We love you for it. I hope you're continuing to boost your show, your product, by retweeting our shows, by sharing them on Facebook, by telling friends and other Saints fans, hey, you got to check out these two goofy guys that come on the air on Wednesday. They occasionally know what they're talking about, but they're going to give you an entertaining product. Like Brendan said, we do apologize that we didn't get to interact with you as much as we normally like to. But you are the backbone of this show, and we love you for it. That being said, you can follow, if you don't already, you can follow me on Facebook, Bob Rose, over on Twitter at BobbyR2613, and you can follow all of our works and our show streamings, not only through our Bayou Blitz Facebook page, but also through the Saints News Network and at Saints News over on Twitter.
And for myself, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at BT Boylan. Make sure to follow the Bayou Blitz Twitter page, Bayou Blitz Pod, POD. We'll have our usual polls. I definitely want to hear from you guys, too. We've had some great guests so far this year. So if you guys think we should speak to someone in particular, please drop a note. And if you missed the show with Tyrone Hughes, Saints Hall of Famer and 3-time NFL kicking yards return leader. Did I say that right?
Anyway, no, but that's okay. You're tired. We understand.
It's late. But he led the league 3 times in return yards. Make sure to go check that out. New Orleans native, got to play for his hometown team. He is a great football mind. We loved getting the chance to talk to him. So if you haven't checked that out, as well. Shameless plug because Bob already used all the other plugs with the Saints News Network. Sunday, and I'll remind you guys on Sunday. Sunday is the 2-year anniversary of my film, The Dancing Bulldogs. If you guys have not, I know it's been 2 years already.
Wow.
2 years already since the film came out. If you guys have not already watched it, it's on YouTube. Just type in The Dancin, DANCIN apostrophe. And then Bulldogs. There's a couple trophies behind me from the film. We're certainly proud of it. If you guys are basketball fans like me, I'm going crazy. I got football. Real basketball starts in a couple days. My girlfriend's going to hate how much time I'm in front of the TV, Bob.
Right?
But please, if you haven't, check it out. Let me know how you guys like it. We worked really hard on it. It's obviously my alma mater as well. So it was really cool to get to link up and do that. So my shameless plug of the day, but please, please, please go follow the Bayou Blitz Twitter page. Connect with us a little bit more. We love connecting with you guys. And if Bob hasn't expressed that enough over the podcasts and today, and I haven't, you should know by now. We love interacting with you guys. We want to hear more from you, and we want to hear what you guys want us to talk about, who you want us to interview and bring on the show, because it's important. Because at the end of the day, we don't have a show if it weren't for you guys. So we certainly appreciate you guys. We want to hear some more feedback. Again, if you want to shoot us an email opposed to going to social media, because if I remember correctly, some of you guys don't have social media in today's day and age. It's a little weird, but I don't blame you either.
No.
Bob's sitting there like, man, if I didn't have to have it, I probably wouldn't.
I said that many a time.
Have you? Yeah,
yep.
I think I have too over the years. But you can shoot us an email as well. It's BayouBlitzPod@gmail.com. I will drop it in the comments on Sunday as well. So until then, I'm Brendan Boylan. That's Bob Rose. Whichever way. And we'll see you guys on Sunday. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Bayou Blitz podcast. Find your peace, spread love, practice positivity. And we'll see you then.